In today's video, not only am I going to show you how to take the best iris photo you can, but I'm also going to show you the best editing techniques that you can implement that will create a really eye-catching photo. So first, let's talk about equipment. On the camera side of things, I'm going to be using the Canon R6 Mark I. Now, what's going to be really important with macro photography is making sure that you have a macro lens. Now, it doesn't matter if this is 60mm, 85mm, or 100mm, as long as you can get up close and personal with your subject's eye, you're completely fine. For me, I'm going to be using the Canon 100mm macro f2.8. And the third piece of equipment that we need to talk about is lighting. Now, in this video, I'm going to be using a ring light that attaches to the front of my lens and will flash when I take the photo. This particular ring light only cost me £80 secondhand, but if you don't want to use a ring light or you don't have one, you don't want to buy one, it's not a big deal. You can just do what I did in my original iris photography video and just use as much natural light as possible and maybe even supplement that with a light in the background that's directed towards the subject's eyes. But it will definitely have its drawbacks, which we'll talk about later.
So the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that your subject's head is rested against something that's comfortable. As you can see, when the head isn't rested against something that's comfortable, the eye comes in and out of focus constantly, whereas when it is rested, everything is stable and you'll be able to grab focus a lot easier. One big difference in comparison to last video is we were working with all natural light, so we had a very lit room and we had a big light in the background. Whereas now that we're using a macro ring light, we're able to do something that is going to get us a lot better results. Now, all you need to sort that is maybe something like a very large towel or a black bed sheet, anything like that, so that you can cover the subject and the camera. This is going to eradicate all of our reflections. Now, when we're working with something like this, it kind of looks like the whole 1920s camera style photo thing. We're going to put our head under, and that's where we're going to take the picture.
So for my settings, I went with a shutter speed of 1/160th of a second, an aperture of f9 to get as much in focus as I physically could, and an ISO of 100 to keep my noise levels right the way down to make this a nice, clean image. All right, so the Lightroom portion of this video is going to be incredibly important because it's going to take us from having a raw file that looks something like this to an image that looks like this. Now you can see there's a massive difference. So I'm going to go through every single slider that you need to go through to achieve something similar. So naturally, the first thing I'm going to do is cut out a lot of the rubbish that we just simply don't need by cropping in the image to just pretty much the iris. Everything around it is going to be deleted later on in the crop. So right now this image is looking pretty dark, so I'm just simply going to get the exposure and bring that up very nicely so I can see all those details in that iris, bring out all that color, as well as the contrast. I want to make sure that those dark parts are very dark. Contrary to what I usually do, I'm actually going to bring the highlights up all the way, and the shadows are definitely going to be an important one to bring quite the way up. I'm going to bring this up to +70. Now you'll notice that the white part of my eye is very overexposed, but that really doesn't matter because we're going to be cutting this out. All I'm focusing on is the actual iris itself. So I'm going to bring these whites up and these blacks down just to add some more contrast, and this also brings out a lot of the color as well the more I bring down the black. Now, coming away from the colors, I want to go into more of the detail. So for the texture, I'm just going to bring this up ever so slightly to a +5. I don't want to bring it up too much, otherwise it starts introducing a lot of grain that I don't want in my image. And the clarity, I'm probably going to put it around about +20. Again, just a little touch of the dehaze at +10. One thing I think that's very important for this is going to be up in the sharpness. Lightroom is automatically set to 40. I'm probably going to bring this up to around about 90, 100. Now that we've gotten to this point, it's time to take the image out of Lightroom and get it into Photoshop so we can start working on these reflections. So all I need to do is right click that image, edit in Photoshop, and this will automatically open up Photoshop with our file ready to go. If you've managed to take your photo with a ring light, it should look something like this. You're going to have just the one reflection of the light inside of the pupil, but you would have been able to have a very low ISO. I was shooting at ISO 100, so there is a lot of detail, hardly any noise or grain, and it looks amazing. If you don't have a ring light and you've gone for a fully lit room, that's completely fine, but your raw file might look something along the lines of this. Now, this is also my eye. Both of these are my eyeballs, but this one has been taken in an open room. The difference being, this was taken at an ISO of 3200, whereas this photo in Photoshop was taken at an ISO of 100. We can clearly see the difference between these two raw files. But considering in my original video, I was able to take this raw file and turn it into this final result, it goes to show that with the right editing, you can make a lot of things work. So anyway, back to our photo, we need to get rid of these reflections, which luckily is very easy to do. For this portion where my fingers are ever so slightly being reflected, I'm literally just gonna go up to the lasso tool and draw a very simple outline around it. There's really not a lot in there. There's my perfectly drawn outline. I'm just gonna click on generative fill, type in remove this. I'm just gonna let Photoshop do the work and get rid of that for me. And just like that, it's gone. I also have my 3 different choices as to which generative fill I like. Personally, I think I'm a fan of number 3. It adds in a bit more detail, so I'm gonna go with option number 3 there. Now I just need to get rid of the middle part. But first I'm just gonna combine these layers together real quick just to keep everything nice and simple. Now you might think it would be a good idea to just get the elliptical marquee tool and sort of like draw a circle around and maybe paint that in and have a kind of perfect circle. But if you notice, the pupil is never a perfect circle. It contracts and everything like that. So it's never perfect. So I'm not too fussed about my pupil not looking perfect because they're just not in nature. So all I'm going to do is get the paintbrush that is painted black. I'm going to have the hardness around maybe 70%, and I'm definitely going to make it a little bit smaller. And I'm just simply going to paint in black and get rid of the ring light and do this as best as I possibly can. So now comes the fun part, which is getting rid of all the rubbish in the background by getting my elliptical marquee tool, making a nice decent sized circle, and then essentially hovering it over the part of the eye that I want to keep, which this looks pretty good to me. So I'm just going to Control Shift and I to invert the image, and then I'm going to click on select and mask. I'm going to put my smoothness around 30 and the feather in the same region at about 7 pixels. Click OK and delete on the keyboard, and then if you do Control and D, there is your perfect cutout of your iris. But we're definitely not stopping there because we have some edits that we need to do. Because if I was to present this, it'd be like, oh, okay, cool, that looks good. But if I was to present this instead, there's a huge difference. So the first image that I'm going to show you guys how to make is going to be the yin-yang photo. So working with our baseline here, I'm going to go over to the crop tool and I want to make sure that I've got it set to a square ratio. So I'm going to go to square and I want to make this about 3000 pixels each way. I'm going to have one iris at the top, and here's the other iris that I prepared earlier. Now, it's quite important to make sure that both irises are the same size. As you can see, the blue is definitely outweighing the brown. So I'm just going to make this one a little bit smaller so that they match a bit better. That's perfect. Now, a little bit like Banksy, I need a stencil. So the stencil that I'm going to be using is a yin-yang photo that I just found online. Now, we also need one more layer, and then we're going to arrange everything there to make everything nice and clean. So I'm going to create one new layer and drag it down to the very bottom. And we're going to call this our background. We're going to rename yin-yang and make sure that the yin-yang layer is just above our background. Call this brown iris and this one blue iris. This way everything is nice, neat and organized. Now the first thing I want to do in my background is come over to the paintbrush tool, make sure that my hardness is on full and my size is pretty much on full, and I'm going to select a very, very nice green and fully paint that in. I'm just basically using this as a green screen at the moment so that our black background that we'll eventually have doesn't contrast in right now with the black yin-yang that we have. So I want green in there so that it's like no other color that we have. So everything is separate. Another thing that I'm going to do real quick, because it's going to save us a lot of time in the future, is come over to our yin-yang layer. And I just want to get rid of these little circles in the middle. So I can have this one be white. This will help us when it comes to selection stuff later on. If we kept them, it would kind of make life quite hard. So we're just going to get rid of them right now. So now you should have something that looks like this. Now we need to make sure that our irises are perfectly in line where we want them. This actually looks kind of perfect. It's worked out quite well there, actually. You want to leave just a little border around your iris. And honestly, that fits quite perfectly. I'm going to do the same with our blue iris and make it fit in somewhat like that. This looks brilliant. This is a great starting point. So this is what your Photoshop should look like at the moment. With your layers, you'll have your green background, your yin-yang, your brown iris, and your blue iris, or whatever colors you're working with. And this is what your photo should look like right now. So the next step to make this work is by turning off the visibility for both irises, selecting our yin-yang layer and coming over to select and color range. Now with this eyedropper tool, we want to click on the black part of the circle and click OK. Now what you'll notice here is that the inside of the yin-yang is all selected. So because I selected the black part of it, which is the lower part, I'm going to unhide my blue iris as that is our lower part. And with the yin-yang still selected, that's very important, click on your bottom iris layer and then create a layer mask. Everything's normal, but if we look at the layer mask we've applied, you will see the yin-yang on it. That is exactly how you want it to look. And we're going to repeat this again. We're going to hide this bottom layer. We're going to click on yin-yang. We're going to come over to select and color range. Now, instead of clicking the bottom area, we're now going to click the top area. Click OK. Unhide your top layer iris. And with it's still showing a selection, you can see it jumping around there. We want to click on the layer mask and there we have it. Right now we've got our two irises back and we've got this perfect layer mask like this. This is how yours should look. So this is where things start getting fun. With both of our iris layers, we want to just right click them and duplicate it. Now this brown iris, we're going to call it brown liquefy. And on the layer mask of the duplicate, just right click it and click delete layer mask. We don't need a layer mask on that. We only need it on the original. And just do the exact same with the other iris. Just right click it, duplicate layer. And I'm going to call this blue iris liquefy. Click OK and come up to the duplication, right click the layer mask, delete layer mask. Now we have this. So very simply, I want you to come over to any one of your liquefied layers, click on it and come up to filter and then liquefy. With the size of your brush around about 1,000 pixels, what I want you to do is very simply drag and warp your iris. Now it's going to look like something out of Doctor Who, but we want to basically fill up near enough the entire screen, or at least where the yin-yang part is going to be for this particular iris. Maybe get a few curves in there, make it nice and funky, and you should end up with something like this. What I'm going to do is click OK, and now it's basically taking over our entire screen. So on the same layer, I want to apply a layer mask. Now, if yours shows as a white layer mask, I just want you to click on that layer mask and do Control and I. That will turn it into a black layer mask and it will completely get rid of it. If yours already comes in as a black layer mask, you're fine. You don't have to do anything. Either way, your image should now look like this, like nothing ever happened, except now we've got a black layer mask on our liquefied layer. And we're going to do the exact same for the other iris. We're going to come back over to liquefy, and again I am simply just going to drag this layer out, and again we're just going to click OK. It's going to take over the screen, but we're going to apply a layer mask. Again, it's coming as white, so I'm just going to do Control and I. It's now a black layer mask, so everything is back to normal. This is where the image is going to start coming to life. In the description to this video is going to be a link to a bunch of brushes that are called explosion brushes. So let me show you what they look like. If we click on our brush tool here, and then come over to where we can select what brushes we want, I have downloaded these brushes that are all different styles of explosions. So it gives us brushes that look like this. I would highly recommend using these brushes completely free of charge. It will make your image look a lot better. So I'm going to go with Explosion 8, and then I'm going to make sure that I'm clicking on the layer mask for one of my irises. I'm going to go with the brown iris layer mask, and you'll notice that it's on the white background, so my brush color is also going to be white. And we're essentially going to paint back in the liquefied layer, but with this really cool brush. So the first thing that I want to take care of is painting back in the edges. The edges are what really define the shape of the yin-yang shape. So I'm going to get that done first before we work on the middle part. And to make sure that we're painting only within the white walls and not outside of it, I'm going to make sure to come to the brown iris layer where we've got this layer mask. I'm going to hold down Control on my keyboard, press left click, and there you'll notice that everything is selected. So we're completely fine to zoom in on our image, grab the brush tool, and I paint. Even when I come outside of the walls, my paintbrush is not coming outside of the walls. So I'm going to go around the edges and define this shape. So what I want to do now is work on the inside of it. And I'm going to want to use a selection of different brushes. You know, when you download these explosion brushes, it doesn't just come with the one, there are quite a few. So I would recommend using as many different brushes as you can to simulate a sort of explosion kind of look. You don't want anything to be similar or follow any patterns, make it random. So let's give that a go. So it might be a little bit hard to tell, but this image is actually coming along really, really well. What you'll notice is I've gone for a lot of density around where the iris is, and then I've made it disperse quite nicely so that as we come to the bottom, there's a lot less coming through, but right next to the iris, there's quite a lot. Now, another thing that you've probably done that I have also done is accidentally painted over our original iris, which can cause some funky colors going on. So all I'm going to do is come back over to my eraser tool, make sure that my hardness is somewhere around 8% and just kind of paint off this layer mask and get that off of my original iris, because I do not want to take away the beauty of that. I don't want to take away any of the detail that I had in there. And there we have it. Now we want to duplicate everything we just did, but with the other layer. So what you'll want to do is come over to your blue iris layer here, hold down Control on the keyboard, press the layer mask, and now we've got this lovely selection so that we can't go outside of the walls. Come over to your blue iris liquefied layer and click onto the layer mask. And we're actually fine to keep this as a white paintbrush. It seems to work, so we're going to keep it there and work on this side. All right, so I am done with both layers. So now it's time to see what we've actually got going on so that we can do some final corrections and get this image completed. So all I'm going to do is come over to our background layer. I want to grab my paintbrush tool and I want it on a hard round, and I want to make sure that it is black, and I am simply going to paint the background so that we've got this, and then I'm going to come over to my Yin-Yang layer and remove it. And here is the image so far. This is where you can review what you've got so you can see what changes you might want to make. The change that I want to make, I think the blue layer looks absolutely incredible. However, I feel like I might have gone a little bit harsh on the brown layer towards the very top. I feel like we can just see too much of that liquefied layer and it's kind of breaking the illusion. So I want to get rid of that. So all I'm going to do this is come over to my rubber tool. I'm not going to keep it on this round one. Luckily, the explosion tools actually work on the eraser as well. So I'm going to come over to the brown iris liquefied layer and I'm going to click on the layer mask, and from there I can simply just start rubbing out some of the excess brown that I've put in that I just don't want there, and give it that very broken up look so that it's not too intense around the brown layer. And honestly, I am quite, I think with a few more clicks, happy with what we're looking at there. Another couple of fixes that I might do is working on the blue iris layer. You'll notice that it's not really a nice pointy tail going on at the top here. So I'm going to sort this out as well. That should do it. And I'm going to do the exact same at the bottom here. And there we have an image that I am very happy with. Of course, if you spend a lot more time working on yours, you'll be able to get it absolutely perfect in the way that you want it. But let's move on to the next image that we're going to create. Now, luckily, the next image that we're going to be creating is a lot simpler than the yin-yang. So let's jump straight into it. First thing I want to do is create a new crop. So I'm going to come over to my cropping tool here and I want to set it to a 16:9 ratio. I just feel like this works a lot nicer, and I definitely want to make this a bit bigger. Let's go for a nice high resolution here up into the 4K region. And I'm going to grab the iris that we've already edited as well as the blue iris. Typical stuff of bringing them back over. Now, for this one, what I've gone and done is downloaded an image. I've simply gotten this image from Google. It's a copyright-free image of some stars that I'm going to use as a background. Now, like any good backgrounds with a foreground, I want to select this, come up to filter, and head over to blur. Underneath the blur section, I'm going to come over to Gaussian blur and set it to about 4 or 5 pixels to really create some depth. One thing that I see these eye shops doing is they'll have stars as a background, but with no blur whatsoever. And I feel like there's not that distinguishing depth between the two. So I like to add in some blur, add in some depth, click OK. And now we're already at this part. Now I want to position the irises in the way that I want. So I'm going to make this nice and large and kind of have it coming in from the side. I'm going to do the same with the brown layer here, make that nice and big, have that coming in from the side, just like so. And already we're nearly done. So one thing that's going to be really important is adding in the glow to the irises. So to do that, bring your mouse over to one of the layers and double click it. Head over to the outer glow section and click on it. Now, the first thing that I would recommend doing is changing the color to a color that matches your iris. So in this little box here, just click on it and you'll have an eyedropper tool, and you can simply click any way you'd like to get a good color from your iris. I think a nice vibrant orange, but not too bright, somewhere in this region, I think looks pretty good. And you're just going to want to copy the settings that I have on screen. I've got the blend mode set to screen, opacity is at 80 with 0% noise. The technique is set to softer with a spread of 0% and a size of about 230 pixels and a range of 100%. Of course, if this doesn't look good on yours, just mix and match with some of the sliders, but that should be a very good base to start with. Now, a little touch that I like to add on as well is ticking the bevel and emboss box. When I tick this, I just get a little bit of that nice glow on the outskirts of my iris. And that is all I need to do with that iris. I'm going to go ahead and repeat the exact same thing with the other iris. I'm going to click on bevel and emboss as well as the outer glow. And again, I'm going to change the color because notice how it's just selected the last color that I had. So click in this box and then we're going to find maybe a nice bright blue to work with. This is kind of looking good there. There we go. So we're going a bit more into the region of a grey white, but that looks absolutely incredible. And just like that, in under 2 minutes, we've created another image. Now, even though the Yin-Yang is very popular, this kind of thing with an outer glow is also very popular. I think when it comes to irises, the most popular edit that there is definitely when two irises are clashing together and exploding. So if you guys want to learn how to do that, you can go ahead and check out my original video talking about how to capture and edit irises. Inside of that video, I'm going to talk you through step by step how to create that explosion. There is a link right next to me. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to click a like, leave a comment, let me know how you guys get on with your own edits. Go and check out that video. I'll see you guys in the next one.